Chris Sewall here, baseball card collector, investor, dealer in that order. Welcome everyone. Wanted to do a little exercise today looking at some more common base cards and seeing if they're worth getting graded and going through each of the 4 grading companies with each card and seeing how that sort of pans out if you were to get each card graded with each of the 4 different companies and compare them with each other. Now we all know that PSA generally outsells the other companies in terms of resale value, but that's not the only part of the equation. There's also how much is the grading fee for each company and what is the likelihood your card will actually get a high grade. Also, PSA does not have, a black label or a pristine 10 or an elite 10 grade, so that should be factored in as well. So I use these 2 cards here as my test subjects, a 2018 Topps Update Juan Soto rookie and a 2020 Panini Mosaic Joe Burrow rookie. Both of these cards are very common. There's lots of sales data for them in all the grades from all the companies. You can pick them up raw for maybe $10 or so, and but at the same time, they're key rookies of major stars, so cards that a lot of people want. And for this video, I wanted to look at cards of this value or category for 2 very specific reasons, actually. First is that cards like this used to make a lot of sense to grade before the pandemic. We'll call it BTT, before 2020. Because a lot of key rookie cards like this you could buy for a few dollars, and PSA grading fee was maybe $10, but they'd have specials down to $7. So you could buy a card like this, send it to PSA for $7, and in a 9 it would sell for maybe $20, and in a 10 it would sell for, let's say, $50. And the numbers just really worked out. A 9 you'd be up a little bit, a 10 you'd be up $30 or more, and you could send cards like this in bulk, and it would really pan out. But after the pandemic, now ATT we'll say after 2020. With the fees being so much higher and a lot of ultra modern values have really dropped, especially on base cards. I wanted to see if there was any sort of what that looks like today. And the second reason is if you get into more valuable cards, PSA is just going to dominate for the most part, with maybe just a few exceptions here and there. But at the lower value level, things like that I mentioned earlier, gem rate and the grading fee may come into play. So we're going to look at this from a purely financial standpoint. Do the numbers make sense if you were looking to grade this card and make a profit on it or whatever. We'll start with the Juan Soto, and there's going to be a lot of numbers and calculations in this video. I'll try to summarize them as best I can so as not to put everyone to sleep. So here's what the card sells for in various grades from each of the 4 grading companies. You can see in a PSA 10 sells for about $45. And one thing I'll say, I'm assuming that you would never send this card in unless you thought it had a chance to get above a 9 in any of the companies. If you thought a 9 was the best it could do, it wouldn't make sense to send it in. You might as well just buy the card in the holder already, as it will be cheaper that way than paying the grading fees. And here's the percentages that each company has given out for each grade on this card. Each company has graded this card many times. There's a very high pop count relatively for each of the 4 grading companies. And you can see the breakdown of how likely it is to get a 9, 9.5, 10 for each one, etc. So I did this calculation with both cards across all 4 companies, and I'm only going to go over it in detail once here. The Juan Soto with PSA, otherwise, again, it would just put everyone to sleep. But imagine you had 100 copies of this card, and nobody's going to be sending in 100 copies of this card, but imagine you were, and the value of the card raw is about $10. And remember, whenever you send in cards for grading, you are giving up the value of the card raw. The grading fee for PSA, the lowest grading fee at the moment, is $19, so your upfront grading fee cost would be $1,900. You should expect to receive 66 10s, 27 9s, and 7 below a 9. That's the historic average of how PSA has graded this card. Again, we're assuming that every card you're sending in you believe to be a 10 contender. If you multiply all that out, all 100 cards and their values, you would end up $613, meaning you've increased the value of your 100 cards $613 on top of the grading fees. Basically, you're going to be putting $613 in your pocket more than you would have if you had not gotten the cards graded. And that breaks down to an average of $6.13 per card, as you can see in the yellow box at the bottom. That's the expected value if you were to send in 1 card. If you were to send in one Juan Soto card, you would expect on average for it to increase in value by $6.13. So that is a positive. It's a net gain. I mean, not much, but that's up to the individual whether that's worth it to them or not. But it's a good number to know in terms of comparing it to the other companies and see how they all fare against each other. So as I said, did the same exercise with each grading company. For SGC, it comes out to, on average, you would increase the card's value by $4.29. The surprise result of the exercise, at least for me, was Beckett with this Juan Soto, as on average, you would increase the card's value by nearly $12 by sending it to Beckett. That's basically double of what PSA was. Now, it should be noted that Beckett is heavily weighted towards the top. If you took out that 1 out of 100 Black Label 10, Beckett would actually drop to below PSA. And in fact, if you sent in 100 cards to Beckett, you would lose money on 86 of them. So 86% of the time you would actually lose money. It's just those 14 wins are big wins. So there's definitely sort of like a gambly or lottery ticket aspect to Beckett more so than the other companies. And CSG definitely had the worst results of the four, with on average you would lose $3.31 by sending this card into CSG. I used the $12 grading fee, which is their lowest service. Even so, it still landed in the negative. Now, they've never given out a perfect 10 for this card, so if they did, in theory, that could, make the results a little bit better. So here's the final results of the Juan Soto. This is the expected added value of sending in one copy of the card to each of the four grading companies. Beckett coming out looking really good, but again, I think that's heavily distorted, as you would actually lose money 86% of the time with Beckett. And one thing I'll say, because a number of you will mention it in the comments, correctly mention it in the comments, is this is an overly simplified, formula. I didn't factor in things like shipping and insurance and seller fees and things like that. So understand that. All right, next we'll do the Joe Burrow. I'm just going to run through the exact same exercise with the card here. Here's the value of the card in various different grades from all four different companies. And none of the companies gave out an Elite 10 score. There were no SGC Gold Label 10s, no BGS Black Label 10s, and no CSG Perfect 10s. I thought that was surprising. I checked a number of other cards considering which ones to use for this video, but it actually turns out to be the case on most sort of ultra-modern chrome cards, or cards with a chrome surface, chrome or mosaic or prism, that sort of thing, which I was not really aware of, but I found that interesting. Here's a percentage breakdown for each grade of each company for the card. And you can see this one weighted a lot more towards the lower end. Not a lot of 10s given out for this card. Again, no Elite 10s in any of the companies. And Beckett and CSG, basically half of their submissions were below a 9. So for PSA, it works out okay. The card is about a $10 card raw, similar to the Soto. And if you sent in 100 cards to PSA on average, you would be adding about $8 per card to your bottom line. With SGC, you'd actually be operating at a loss, about a $4 expected loss per card. Having no chance at a perfect 10 really hurts, and a pretty low value for an SGC 10. Only $48 doesn't help the cause there. Beckett's even worse than that, operating at about an $8 loss expected value. Basically just having no chance at a Black Label 10 or even a pristine 10 in this case really hurts its value. So it limits the upside so significantly. And again here, 87% of the time you send this card to Beckett, you will be operating at a loss. And CSG again comes in last place, about a $9 expected loss per card. 95% of the time you sent this card to CSG, you would be losing money. So there's the summary for the Joe Burrow. You can see from a purely financial standpoint, PSA is the only company to consider here. So what does all this mean? To me, it just sort of highlights that in the current environment, cards like this just it doesn't make sense to send in. You can send the Burrow to PSA, or you can send the Soto to a couple of the companies and sort of expect a small profit, but it's a really small profit. And once you factor in insurance and shipping and seller fees and the time you have to wait to get your card back, it's just not. It's just not there. I didn't know what the results of this was going to be when I started researching this topic, but I thought this was one category card, like these sort of low-end cards where the other companies might be able to compete with PSA because the prices were low enough where things like the grading fees or the gem rates or having the Black Label 10s, etc., might be able to boost them up enough to compete with PSA. But the results of this really don't suggest that. I mean, Beckett did outperform PSA with the Juan Soto, but PSA is really the winner here. And one thought I had while making this video, I'd love to hear people's comments on this, is I hear a lot of people say that we as a hobby or a community or whatever need to stop putting such a premium on PSA. We're way inflating card values based on the fact that it's in a PSA holder. We're putting too much emphasis on the PSA label, and that's why they're so dominant. And I totally agree. We as consumers certainly play a major part in that, and there's times when it seems crazy that a card in a PSA holder is worth so much more than the same card in one of the other three companies' holders. But I also think there's another piece to this, which again I sort of thought about for the first time when making this video, and that is, it surprises me that at this point, PSA, Beckett, and SGC are all essentially the same price. I mean, all three have their own pricing structure, and you can get things a few dollars more expensive or less expensive based on a lot of factors. Subgrades, how big is your order? Some of them run specials with discounts, and I know PSA has the membership fees. But for the most part, all three are essentially the same price. And we as a community have put a premium on PSA. We have decided that PSA at this moment is the premium brand of the three. For whether that's fair or not, PSA receives far more orders than anyone else, and their cards sell the highest. Again, I'm not saying that's the way it should be. I'm saying that's the way it is. And in any other industry, if there were three brands of something and one of was considered a premium by the consumer and the other two were not, well, they would not be the same price. I mean, think of any other product. Take a handbag. If there were three brands of handbags and 80% of the consumers wanted one of the three brands, and that brand was considered to be more valuable than the other three, well, they would not be the same price. And I'm not saying PSA should raise the rates. I'm actually saying the opposite. Like, to me, it feels that SGC and Beckett are kind of too expensive at this point, given the current landscape. And I've used SGC and Beckett many times in the past. It made financial sense. But today, with PSA just outselling everybody by so much, it's really, really hard to find justification to use them. I would love to use them. I'm a big fan of SGC. I love their customer service. I love how fast their orders come back. I love the tuxedo look. A lot of my PC cards are in SGC holders. And with Beckett, I think the subgrades have a lot of appeal. But again, it's just sort of hard to justify using either of these companies given their current pricing structure, unless it was purely a PC card and a card I had no intention of ever selling or trading. I don't know what the macro results would be of them lowering prices, or maybe it's a terrible idea. And I don't even know that I really believe what I'm saying right now. I'm just more just thinking out loud, but would love to hear what other people think of this thought. But that's it for now. Really appreciate everyone watching, and see you all again next time. Thanks, everyone.